Paul King understands Superman, and here's how he would make a Superman movie. Clark Kent is a perfect person. The closest thing he has to a character flaw is that some people would say he's too trusting, but they are wrong. Instead, he is so trusting that he leads others to rise to the level of his trust. So the actual closest thing he has to a character flaw is that he's a bit of an idiot. This version is a himbo. He sees the good in everyone, has boundless optimism, and has this childlike wonder about everything. And he is the way that he is because he was raised on a farm in Smallville, Kansas by Ma and Pa Kent, who were freaking perfect parents, who also instilled in Clark not only good values, but a love of the big city of Metropolis. Ma Kent's even doing a painting of Metropolis, where she's already painted in the landscape, and she's painted in Clark, and she's got some outlines left to paint in herself and her husband and Lana and maybe someone else. To them, Metropolis was the greatest city in the world, and all they wanted was to go to Metropolis, but they could never afford it. The Kents tragically die, and Clark decides to move to Metropolis, where he realizes Ma and Pa Kent have never been to Metropolis and don't actually understand what it's like. So what is Paul King's Metropolis like? This is a quaint, old-fashioned city. The sort of place that's filled with streetcars and Model Ts, and the sort of place where Clark Kent can change in a phone booth. Because modern and relevant are not the same thing. And this is the sort of city where people will generally ignore you unless you make a big deal out of something. The sort of place where if little Timmy says, "Look, up in the sky," people will look up in the sky. And if you can get people's attention, you can generally rely on the kindness of strangers. Now, Clark is not used to this. He's not used to having strangers. He's used to being in a place where everyone knows everyone. Homesick and lonely, Clark takes down his Ma Kent's painting of Metropolis, and he can see the forms get filled in with paint figures of the people he loves back home. And he can see those paint forms doing the things that he loved with them back home. And he just wishes he were back in Smallville. And wandering around with this painting, lost in thought, this imagination scene ends abruptly when a random thief steals the painting right out of Clark's hands. But after some shenanigans about being a fish out of water, Clark catches the attention of the staff of the Daily Bugle, where he gets a job. This is where we meet our supporting cast: Lois, Jimmy, Perry, Sam, those sorts of people. And these are the people who have the actual character arcs. They start out probably cynical about the world, and they grow to be not that. Clark doesn't have a character arc. He inspires their character arcs. Because he doesn't need one, he's already perfect. In fact, most of their character arcs is just becoming more like Clark. Act 2 of the movie is largely shenanigans. The sorts of shenanigans that cause those character arcs, as Clark makes Metropolis a better place, one person at a time. Not just by solving their problems, however small their problems may be, but by making them better people through his influence. Along the way, Superman meets our villain, Lex Luthor, by trying to help him. Now, Lex is one of the only people in Metropolis who outright refuses Superman's help. Unfortunately, while Paul King does understand Superman, he does not understand Lex Luthor. I'm not going to tell you how Lex Luthor should be done in film, I'm going to tell you how Paul King would actually do Lex Luthor. This is not a complex villain who you can hero worship about on social media. At most, he will pretend to hate Superman because of what Superman could do and what if Superman turns evil and we have to be prepared against that. No. That is his pretense. But, and I do want to point this out, no one in Metropolis believes Lex Luthor's pretend monologue about, "Oh, but what if Superman turns evil? He could destroy us all." That monologue is played as a joke in this version, because everyone in Metropolis knows he's perfect. He will never turn evil. What paranoid conspiracy garbage are you on about? At his core, this is a cartoon bad guy who just wants money. Preferably played by a cartoon actor. Hugo Weaving is exactly the vibe we're going for here. His actual motivations, which he will say on screen in a supervillain monologue to his henchmen, are essentially, Superman can solve every problem. He can solve world hunger. He can solve hatred and prejudice and bigotry. And he can make the world a perfect place just by being himself. And if the world is perfect, and if he solves every problem, then what am I supposed to sell people? He is the living embodiment of monopolistic capitalism who looks dashing in a suit. So Lex Luthor wants to thwart Superman's plans of making the world a better place. That is the sort of Lex Luthor that Paul King would make. In the Act 2 climax, Lex Luthor sets Superman up. And the vibe we're going for here is Miracle on 34th Street, when Kris Kringle gets set up. The good thing that Superman was trying to do turned out to have bad consequences, except no it didn't, because it was just a bunch of Luthor's henchmen play acting, including the thief who stole Clark's painting. Now, Superman's crime, whatever it is plastered all over the news, but no one in Metropolis actually believes that Superman did it. But Superman believes that Superman did it. And he figures, I am functionally immortal. A few years in prison won't mean anything to me, so when I come out, I will just keep being Superman. And while he's in prison, we see the lives of his coworkers and the lives of the people he's been helping in Metropolis, and we get to really see Metropolis is worse off without the influence of Superman. The only shining light in this dark time is that Lois and Jimmy and Perry and all his friends still have the character growth that he gave them, even though their lives are materially worse. Now, Lois, being a freaking investigative reporter, finds out that this was a setup. Around the same time, Superman, being an investigative reporter, finds out that this cell was lined with kryptonite, sponsored by LexCorp. So he can't break out, but his friends can break him out. And so our third act is Clark's friends at the Daily Bugle using their very specific skills from Act 1 to pull off a heist to save Superman. This is not just because I love heist movies, this is just what Paul King does. The heist almost fails and Superman almost dies. But somehow or other, the specific citizens of Metropolis, who Superman has helped throughout the movie, come together to save Superman and to somehow destroy Lex. Lex goes to prison, Clark goes home, where he finds his friends holding a welcome home party for him. And at the welcome home party, Lois gives Clark a gift. She found Ma Kent's painting, and he looks at the painting of Metropolis, and he can see the faces of Ma and Pa Kent, and Lana, and his other friends from Smallville, waving goodbye to him made of paint. And then the faces get replaced with Lois, and Jimmy, and Perry, and the rest of Clark's friends in Metropolis, saying hello, made of paint. And Clark looks at the painting and says, it really is the greatest city in the world. And credits, during which we see what happened to the rest of the main characters after the movie. That's how Paul King would make Superman. Follow for more film talk.